It's the biggest debate in tennis right now. Should the Davis Cup get a revamp? Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog. Remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. The timing is pretty ironic, but in the long while I was away from this channel, for which I have many excuses, I was on the verge of filming a video titled Why I Am a Davis Cup Convert. Which is pretty funny given recent events, but it was mainly out of support for the best of 5 set format, to be honest. Best of 5 for the win. Still, I was coming round to the whole competition after a long time of feeling it just interfered with the tennis calendar, seeing how much certain players, Nick Kyrgios for example, value team competitions and how it brings out the best in them definitely helped to alter my outlook on it. And also it does offer a small amount of ranking points, so it's not exactly an exhibition event. But as many of you will be aware, there has been much talk recently about how the Davis Cup is dying a death and needs a revival for lack of top player appearances and so on and so forth, or so they would have us believe. Actually, there have been top ATP names in the Davis Cup final for much of the last decade, so there you go. I am sticking a link in the description which will tell you a bit more about the Davis Cup if you are unfamiliar with it, but just before I go ahead into analysis and explaining the recent events that are affecting the tournament, I will just give a bit of background on the Davis Cup for anyone who is not as familiar with it. If this doesn't interest you, then skip to the point in the video referenced above my shoulder about here. Basically, the Davis Cup is a men's tournament, played over 4 weekends every year. All the competing nations are split into various groups or zones depending on their previous results in the competition, and the most prestigious of these groups is the World Group, which contains 16 nations. These nations are split into 4 groups and play a knockout tournament until the finals weekend in November, and the winner of that finals weekend is the winner of the Davis Cup for that season. At points during the season, there are also playoff ties to decide which teams will be in which group/zone for the next season. Hope that made sense. This past week, the ITF, in partnership with footballer strike soccer player Gerard Pique and his company Kosmos, have announced some pretty massive potential changes to the Davis Cup, which FYI is a tournament that has been played annually for over 100 years. You can find the full details on the ITF website, link in the description, but I'm going to try and break down the proposal to its simplest form, or what I believe is its simplest form. Rather than play the official World Group, the top tier of Davis Cup, throughout the year, the plan is to have a week-long World Cup of Tennis finals at the end of November. It would feature 18 nations and begin in a round-robin style format before progressing to a knockout stage. Also during this week there would be playoff matches featuring the winners of Zone Group 1 to decide which nations enter the finals. They are really packing it in full. Also, outside of the World Group, the other zones would stay in the same format of competing at certain weekends throughout the year. The changes I have just described are not in effect as yet, and they may not even come into being. They are subject to approval at the ITF's annual general meeting, AGM, which will be held in August, more on that later. I have previously thought that the Davis Cup needs some small changes in order to stay appealing or relevant, but there are some obvious flaws in this new plan, starting at the point of the season in which it is scheduled to take place. Just take a look for a moment at what Pique says regarding the concept for what is essentially a whole new event. I quote, "Together we can elevate the Davis Cup to new heights by putting on a must-see World Cup of Tennis finals featuring the top nations and top players. However much money you're putting into the event, you just cannot guarantee the attendance of the world's elite, and Kosmos is putting in a lot of money. Anyone who knows anything about tennis know that the players are already complaining that their off seasons are not long enough, and then you go and add a whole extra week of competition onto the end of the season. It's really not ideal. And then consider the surface, which is most likely to be hard courts, which is kind of considered the neutral surface. Rafael Nadal has been among the relatively few at this stage players to speak out in favour of the new proposals, but is he really going to hang around at the end of a gruelling season to play another week on hard courts? Which is not good for his injuries, which are keeping him off the tour a lot right now. And on a related note, given that Nadal is now dealing with yet more injuries, how many players are actually going to be fit after 11 months of hard competition in order to play a full week of tennis? Pique's proposals are targeting the top ATP players. That area of players is currently carnage right now, and we have barely entered March. March. I think it's widely acknowledged, even among those who are set against the new proposals, e.g. Lucas Pouille, that the Davis Cup probably needs a few tweaks in order to still hold people's attention, because even some tennis fans really don't care that much about the event at all. But even saying that changes need to be made, I would actually have to think quite hard about what those changes would be, because as far as I can see it, if your country is doing well in the Davis Cup, then you are more likely to be interested in the Davis Cup as a whole. That's generally how it works. Growing up in England, I didn't really know anyone for a long time who knew anything about tennis outside of Wimbledon. However, the moment GB were doing well in the Davis Cup, everybody seemed to care about the tournament, even people that I didn't know knew what a tennis racket was. Obviously and naturally, there has been a lot of outcry from tennis fans over the potential changes. I keep using the word potential because obviously they are not confirmed yet. However many millions of dollars Kosmos are throwing into this. The most common complaint is that home ties are being lost, with people saying that this will sap a lot of the atmosphere and the spirit from the competition. And honestly, countries like Great Britain won't be too happy about that one either, because in 2015 the home ties were like an additional player of their squad. That's the last I'll say on that one for now. Then you simply have the argument for tradition. Why destroy such a traditional event in the sport, something that has carried on for so many years? To be honest, I think some fans and players against the proposals are going to have to up their game, because their arguments are mainly based on emotions rather than facts. Most traditions are either altered or come to an end at some point, and this is coming from someone who is massive on traditions. I watch the same films every Christmas Eve, and to be honest, I would get pretty annoyed if someone came and messed with the all-white dress code at Wimbledon. It's just one of those things. But there is the danger of too much change, and with a change as massive as this, I get the idea that too much change could happen in the not too distant future, or maybe even in the distant future, but still big change could come, is my point. I can't stay on track. I'm sure many of you remember that the first edition of the Next Gen Finals took place at the end of last year, giving the younger men of the ATP a chance to shine. At that event, they were trialling all sorts of stuff, such as no lines judges, best of 4 game sets. And that's why I was not a fan of the event at all, because in my mind it was basically a guinea pig tournament. Like, they were just using it to trial all these fancy ideas they had, trialing things for the sake of television, for the sake of short attention spans, and all in the name of widening the audience. And here's the thing, which is a phrase I seem to use a lot. At the centre of this Davis Cup proposal, we have Gerard Pique, an active footballer. To use the wording of a friend of mine, he is essentially a fan with way too much say in what goes on due to his footballing status. In statements available from Pique to me personally, it looks like he wants to make a big flashy tournament that will draw crowds, make big money, and essentially widen the audience. Here's what I don't really get with this, with the Next Gen Finals, with shortening matches to 3 sets, with the proposals from Steve Simon of the WTA to make shorter matches. Since when did tennis not have a big enough audience? There's enough cash to throw out ridiculous amounts of prize money at Grand Slam events. The main stadiums of major tournaments are generally packed, and at lower level events, most people aren't going to trek halfway across the world to watch an ATP 250. You are generally going to have a national crowd at those events, and tennis, like other sports, is more popular in some countries than in others. And in this digital age, I would say that the tennis following is bigger than it's ever been. Maybe not everyone's an obsessive tennis fan or really into the sport, but there are more casual followers, there's more people that kind of know what's going on. We're digressing slightly, but I will repeat what I've definitely said before, probably on multiple occasions. There are always going to be people who love the sport for what it is. There are already millions of people that love best of 5 set matches, that love marathon 5-hour plus matches when they happen, that love first to 6 games in a set. If those with power go too far, tennis in 20 years will be played on a pitch with a leather ball with a net at either end. As mentioned previously, the plans proposed by Pique and Kosmos, which could be really good, you just never know until it happens, will be put to the ITF AGM in August to decide whether they will come into being or not. In order to be approved, which would be by way of a vote from those in attendance, and it's not open entry, I'm very sorry, there would have to be a 2/3 majority, which the AGM failed to get when they tried to make the Davis Cup best of 3 set matches back in August last year. Also interesting is that that vote will count as nothing if these these new plans come into being because matches would go down to best of 3 sets anyway. Which, to be fair, they kind of have to if you're going to fit that many matches into a single week. If you go onto the ITF website, you can access the minutes from the AGM meeting last year, and you can see that there were a lot of representatives voting in that meeting, so it's going to have to go through a lot of people. So now it's your turn. What do you think of these proposals? What do you think of the Davis Cup in general? And do you think it needs a revamp? Leave a comment and let me know your opinions. For what it's worth, I did always say that the Davis Cup should be called the World Cup of Tennis, or the Tennis World Cup, because it just sounds more professional and important than the Davis Cup. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your patience when it takes me forever to upload a new video. It won't be this long again for a while at least. Can't make promises. March the 4th marks a year since I uploaded the first ever video onto this channel, so at the beginning of next week I will do something to commemorate that. Make traditions. And again, don't forget to subscribe, because basically the more subscribers I have, the more regularly I can afford to upload. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.